Well, to discuss this further, we're joined now by Sir Gerald Howarth, who is former UK Defence Minister, who joins us from Suffolk in the United Kingdom. Sir Gerald, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Always a pleasure having you on our programme. We're also joined by Amanda Makki, who is a Republican strategist and lawyer, and also a friend of this programme. Amanda, let me start by asking you. It looks like and sounds like, listening to what President Trump said today at Davos, military force is off the table with regards to Greenland. Why do you think he's had this change of heart?
Well, I think President Trump has always been consistent on being what I often talk about on your show as a war dove, not a war hawk, someone who doesn't want to engage in war. And as a Republican president, he's been the first that we haven't seen engage on different theaters throughout the world to engage in wars. I think America is tired of being involved in regime changes and being on different continents, giving our money, giving our soldiers. And I think that is why President Trump wants to reassure the American people that we're not going to engage in war. This is a country of 57,000 people. We're not engaging in war, but we are going to use diplomacy, and we're going to make it very difficult for them to say no. So I think he's going to use diplomacy and negotiations instead of scaring America into thinking, oh boy, here we go into another war.
So Gerald, let me ask you what you made of this whole idea that Greenland could even, potentially be taken by force. I mean, we'd have a situation where NATO allies were fighting each other. I mean, what did you make of this whole chapter?
Deeply offensive. The idea that a president of the United States of America could threaten a NATO partner, an ally, and seek to wrest from them territory which has been theirs for decades, if not centuries, on the spurious claim that it would enhance American security, whilst at the same time, the President of the United States sits idly by whilst a real rogue, a real despot, a really evil man, President Putin, rapes another country. I just find this situation completely baffling, and I just think it's very, very sad indeed that the American people have a president who is so deeply offensive. His behavior towards President Zelensky in the White House was just simply outrageous. He's torn up the rule book of diplomacy. So the idea that Amanda says that he will pursue diplomacy, he doesn't know how to do diplomacy, Amanda.
Amanda, what do you say to that? That this is all deeply offensive and he should be focusing his efforts on Ukraine and President Putin, not on a country like Greenland?
I think President Trump is always looking out for the best interests of the United States, and that may be offensive to our NATO allies. It may be offensive to Europe and European countries, but and certainly European leaders have said so, and they want to try to negotiate this in a benevolent way. And obviously we saw the text message from Macron to President Trump that was aired for public view. But I think the point is that President Trump is deeply protective, deeply supportive, and will do anything to protect the United States from threats like Russia and China. And if he believes that Russia and China are gaining a foothold in our hemisphere, he is going to do what he believes is in our best interest. He's also made the case that Denmark hasn't lived up to its obligations under NATO laws. And so he's saying Denmark's not doing anything to protect their territories and support their territories. Denmark pledged in 2019 to a certain amount and only did about 1% of that amount that they promised for Greenland. So he's going to make the case that we are better suited, and it would make more sense for the global world, certainly for the United States, but also for the global world, that the United States is responsible for Greenland, not Denmark.
Okay, so Gerald, former UK Defence Minister, President Trump's argument is that if the United States doesn't own Greenland, then Russia or China will, and that Denmark hasn't done what it should have done to maintain that territory in a way that keeps it secure and is in the best interest of US national security. How do you respond to that?
Greenland is not under threat from Russia as matters stand, although I quite understand that it is a strategically important part of the world and extremely important to the free world. But the fact is that the United States has long had a treaty with Denmark to enable the United States to station forces on the island of Greenland. And over the years, it has progressively reduced its forces from about 14 stations, as former Prime Minister Theresa May told me the other day, that the United States used to have in Greenland, down to one station. But the idea that, so the fact is that the president could embark more forces onto Greenland if he felt it was under immediate threat, which manifestly it is not. However, for Amanda to say that somehow this is all in the interest of the United States, that President Trump is protecting the United States from Russia. No, he is not, Amanda. And you're extremely naive, if you'll forgive me for saying so, for imagining that. For every move that your president has made has strengthened the hand of the most evil man in the world, President Putin. You have emboldened him. He has been flying drones over Poland. He has been penetrating airspace in Estonia. And you just tell me, Amanda, do you think President Trump would invoke Article 5 if Russia sought to drive a wedge between Belarus and Kaliningrad through the Suwalki Gap and thereby take parts of Lithuania and Poland? Would President Trump agree to support Article 5? Bearing in mind the only time Article 5 has been invoked was by America when we all came to your aid.
Amanda, I've got to let you respond to some of those comments made by Sir Gerald.
Well, I just think it's important to understand that, this is Greenland has a lot of rare earth minerals. We've talked about what Greenland has strategically. It's an Arctic nation, much like why we wanted Alaska. President Johnson also pursued Greenland, and so did President Truman. There's a history of presidents in the United States who have wanted Greenland because of its strategic location, rare earth minerals, other things that it has an abundance of. So it is naive to think that China and Russia are not at our doorstep if they are able to gain a foothold in Greenland. And that is what President Trump is trying to avoid. It's obvious what Greenland offers. And if we are not there, as I think Macron said, or the president of Canada said, if we're not on the menu, we're not there, we're on the table. And that's the problem. We want to make sure that we don't have an issue on our soil so close to us, just off the coast of Maine. And we want to do everything to stop that from happening. And that's what President Trump has done. So it's not that this has never been attempted before. Presidents in the past have tried, but President Trump is making, I think, the largest effort we've seen in modern time to try to secure Greenland for the United States.
Right. And so, Gerald, I mean,
the fact is that Greenland is part of the Kingdom of Denmark. Denmark is a member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization of NATO, whose tie I am wearing today in defiance of President Trump. And therefore, if Russia set foot on Greenland, that would trigger Article 5. And as you rightly say, Greenland is not very far from the United States of America. Therefore, it wouldn't take long for American forces to eject the Russians, as we ejected the Argentinians from the Falkland Islands 8,000 miles away 40 years ago. So this is spurious. No, the real reason, Amanda, is because your president is venal. He has removed the president of Venezuela, a good thing, particularly for the Venezuelan people. But what for? Because he wants the oil. And he said he will share the oil between the oil companies in the United States and the people of Venezuela. Forgive me, but this is sort of 19th century politics. This is no way to behave. And what he wants from Greenland is perfectly clear. He wants the rare earth minerals. Your president, I'm afraid, is both vain and venal. And you have just articulated exactly why he is trying to get hold of Greenland, because the United States wants to extract the rare earth minerals from Greenland for its own advantage, because you made it clear right at the outset that this man only has the interests of the United States of America at heart and nobody else's.
Okay, Amanda, your response to that, and then we'll move on to another topic.
Well, President Trump has always said that NATO wasn't holding up their end of the bargain. America was the one that was providing most of the resources and funding for NATO. And so he pushed
That is simply not true, Amanda. The United States provides 16% of the funding of NATO.
From 2 to 5%, which they finally did. But I think the bottom line is that President Trump believes that we have spent a lot of our resources on our NATO alliance, and he believes that he has to do what is in the best interest of the United States, not what is in the best interest of NATO.
Okay, so Gerald, I mean,
fine. In that case, fine. You know, all bets are off then. And next time he calls on us to support him in Article 5, perhaps we should say, well, not unless you yield us some benefit. I mean, this man just sees everything in transactional terms. It's all as it's a kind of upmarket property deal for your president. For that's his whole background.
Venezuelans certainly seem
dealing.
very happy, and even Democrats seem very happy with what he did. Maduro was a dictator, destroyed that country, as did other failed leaders of that country. And so President Trump did a good thing. Maybe Venezuela can be restored to its status of being one of the wealthiest countries in South America, thanks to President Trump.
Okay, so Gerald, let me put it to you. Let me put it to you, Gerald, because I mean there are people we've spoken to, and including today, who've said President Trump, by what he's said in the last few days and weeks with regards to Greenland, has made this not much talked about island the most talked about issue at Davos and in many other forums as well around the world. And the result is a lot of self-reflection in the ranks of NATO member states at NATO head office, and that can be no bad thing. What do you make of that line of argument, Sir Gerald?
Well, I mean, obviously, I'm perfectly prepared to accept that President Trump has done one or two good things, and Venezuela manifestly is one of them for the reasons that Amanda has given. I thought the strike on Iran was also right. I had a letter in the Daily Telegraph last week in which I said that it would be a golden opportunity now to strike Iran and remove these medieval mullahs from the country, which is oppressing their people, is causing strife in the whole of the Middle East, and is threatening to build a nuclear weapon. Ergo, removing them would be a very good thing. And I said that the British government and our military forces should support the United States in that venture. So he hasn't done everything bad. But this is just simply no way to behave, Amanda. This is just completely tearing up the rule book. And it's not tearing up the rule book with Putin. It's tearing up the rule book with us, your allies. Putin, meanwhile, is invited to come on your president's new peace council, whatever that is. For God's sake, what on earth are you doing in America, indulging this man? It is deeply offensive to us. And, you know, we were out there supporting the Americans in Afghanistan because you wanted us there. Incidentally, the people who suffered more losses than anybody else apart from the United States in Afghanistan, I believe, were the Danes. And I met them when I was there, because I don't know if you've ever been to Afghanistan, but I've been there 6 times. And we supported American efforts there. We supported American efforts in Iraq. And now we have this president who's only interested, as you made it absolutely clear, only interested in the United States, only interested in property, and only interested in minerals for the benefit of the United States of America. Come on.
I didn't say he was only interested in minerals.
This is a big
I said it was
world.
strategic, but also there are rare earth minerals. That's obvious.
Okay, well, I think you're both
the rare earth minerals, and it's in our interest to stop China, particularly, getting hold of those rare earth minerals. So perhaps we could do it together. But there's no way you're just going to wrest a sovereign territory away from another sovereign member. It is astonishing that you are not embarrassed by the behavior of your president. I really, really do find it extraordinary. And I salute our own prime minister, who's indulged your president, as indeed have other European nations. But as Winston Churchill said, there is no reasoning with a tiger when your head is in its mouth. We've got to stand up against President both President Putin and President Trump. But let me put it to you, well, how do you see it? Do you see that, are you not embarrassed of the way that your president treated Zelensky? You're not embarrassed of the way he's greeting Putin, who is trying to rape another sovereign state? And your country was party to the agreement under which that state gave up its nuclear arsenal of weapons in return for a guarantee that its independence, sovereignty, and existing borders would be respected.
Let's let Amanda answer.
That's what President Clinton signed. That's what John Major signed. And that's what Boris Yeltsin signed. And you are now in breach of that agreement. The only people standing are the United Kingdom.
Amanda, I must let you respond.
I would just say that President Trump is doing everything, and certainly he campaigned on doing everything to stop the deaths, stop the killings in Ukraine and Russia. No one's winning in that sense. No one's gaining anything in that sense. And he wants to see an end to that war. So what he's tried to do is broker an agreement. He committed to doing that on day one. Obviously, that didn't happen. Day one was a year ago yesterday. But what President Trump has tried to do is invoke diplomacy when he had Zelensky come to the White House, and he's tried to engage both sides. Now, he can't make the horse come to the water. He can't do it without them, and he's tried. But if these two are digging in their heels, what is it that President Trump can do other than continue to try to negotiate and to try to influence them? Excuse me, let me talk, please, and try to influence them. And so that's what he's done. Now, he has also said, Russia has gained on you. You've got to be in recognition of that. Now, I'm not saying Putin isn't a terrible person. I think we can all agree he's a terrible person. But the point is that President Trump is doing what he can, whether it's through diplomacy or negotiation, to try to influence both sides. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened.
So, Gerald.
There's nothing to negotiate save the removal of the brutal aggressor. So,
well, President Biden was president for 4 years while that war went on, and he did nothing. So let's pin some blame there. For 4 years, this war has gone on, and Biden did nothing but write blank checks, and nothing changed.
No, he didn't write. Biden didn't write blank checks. Biden put together a $66 billion package, which my Republican friends there in Washington refused to support. And I asked my friend John Bolton why, and I'm not going to tell you the answer he gave me because it would embarrass you. And the Republicans failed to support Biden's $66 billion package until eventually it came through. So Biden did actually, and I'm not a big fan of Joe Biden, but he did support. But you agreed, the United States signed a document under which it agreed to respect the sovereignty, independence, and existing borders of Ukraine. And you now say that your president wants to end the killing. We want to end the killing, but we want it on the terms of the Budapest Memorandum of 1995, of which you probably haven't heard, but that is the agreement signed by your former president. And therefore, the only thing to negotiate is the withdrawal of these brutal aggressors who are basically cannon fodder in any case. It looks like the Russians have lost something like 1 million people. I don't know if you've ever been to Ukraine. I was there twice last year. I was chairman of the Party Ukraine group in the United Kingdom Parliament. I was a farmer farming in Western Ukraine. I think it is deeply, deeply offensive. And if you think that this negotiating a way of stopping the killing, it all sounds very, very nice. If you think that that is going to lead to a safer world, you must be joking. But if Putin gets his way, if he just gets the Donbass, let alone the rest of Ukraine, do not imagine that he is not going to go elsewhere in Europe. And we care about that.
Okay, just lastly, I mean, Amanda, let me just ask you for your sort of concluding thoughts. I mean, some calling this whole chapter the biggest rift, the biggest fraying of transatlantic ties in decades, some saying ever in the history of transatlantic relations. How damaging do you think all of this has been? And do you think that damage can be repaired?
Well, I think President Trump uses the power of tariffs to influence his counterparts in Europe. That was very obvious with, pretty much everyone he's dealt with. And so I think it's important to think from President Trump's perspective. He is someone who wants to do everything in his power to protect the United States. He's never been particularly fond of NATO. And so he looks at NATO as somewhat of an adversary, even though it's an alliance. And so I think what he's trying to do is change that. And in doing so, he has made strides with NATO nations who have now contributed more to their paying their fair share, as he would call it. So I think he thinks that he is making strides, but that changes have to happen. And I think that's what you're seeing play out on the world stage right now in Davos.
Okay, well, I'm told we're going to have to leave it there because we're out of time. I'd love to keep this conversation going, but unfortunately we can't. Thank you, Amanda Makki. You had the last word. And thank you as well to Sir Gerald Howarth, the UK Defence Minister. Thank you both very much indeed.
Thanks, Tom.